Obandes. The historian's report contained small insinuations. Word spread, a frenzy of interest followed. Only one couple succeeded in purchasing a house in the abandoned village. They expected solitude, found neighbors instead, warm, welcoming, careful to explain the old rules. They did not understand at first why some neighbors kept the rules most carefully, or why some of them were never quite seen arriving or leaving. Find Chapter 172 first. If you have not yet visited the village, it is time for Chapter 176. Word travels quickly when a story contains the right combination of mystery and opportunity. The historian's professional report had been careful. She had used language suited to academic caution, had noted only that the acoustic properties of the settlement merited further study. But careful language does not prevent curious readers from reading between its lines. The report circulated. The village's low property values, combined with the growing rumor of something unusual, made it, briefly, a subject of considerable interest. Applications came from across the country. Only one was approved. A young couple, drawn by the low price and the story in equal measure, moved into a renovated house at the edge of the village in early spring. They arrived expecting the isolation the village's history suggested. 60 years abandoned, a handful of interested buyers turned away by the practical difficulties of rural restoration, their own success feeling almost accidental. What they found instead, on their first morning, was an elderly woman with a basket of vegetables welcoming them to the village. She introduced herself warmly, welcomed them to the village, said several other households remained, a small community that had never fully left, that maintained the village's traditions even as its population had dwindled to a fraction of what it had once been. The couple, surprised but pleased, thanked her, accepted the vegetables, began over the following weeks to meet the other residents. The village, they learned, retained perhaps a dozen households, elderly mostly, warm and welcoming without exception. Careful, in a way the couple found charming at first, to explain the customs of the place, customs that seemed important to the residents in a way that went beyond ordinary politeness. Do not sweep after the sun sets. Leave the offering at the small shrine at the village entrance fresh. Never let it sit more than 3 days. Keep the northern-facing room of any house closed after dark regardless of the season. The couple, wanting to be good neighbors, followed these instructions carefully, found the village otherwise entirely pleasant, quiet, beautiful in the particular way of a place surrounded by mountains and largely undisturbed by modern development. If these stories have found their way to you, if you find yourself returning to this quiet room, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. It tells me, and whatever else watches from this room, that you were here and that you intend to find your way back. If you have a story of your own, Granny is always listening, watching, waiting. It was several months before the wife began noticing the pattern. Small at first, an inconsistency she could not quite name. The elderly woman who had greeted them at the gate on their first morning always seemed to be in her garden, regardless of weather, regardless of season, regardless of the hour the wife happened to look. The man who greeted them each morning at exactly the same spot on the path, always exactly there, always exactly at the same time, never elsewhere in the village at any other hour she encountered him. The couple who waved from their porch whenever the newcomers passed, but who the wife realized over months of observation she had never actually seen enter or leave their house, never seen at the small market that visited weekly, never seen anywhere but that porch. Shock koi, the realization arriving gradually, cold in the specific way of understanding something you have been looking at for months without seeing. I wonder if you moved somewhere new and slowly realized some of your welcoming neighbors were never quite where the living usually are. Would you leave, or would you simply learn the rules more carefully? If you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening. She mentioned it to her husband carefully, uncertain how to frame an observation that sounded, spoken aloud, considerably stranger than it had felt accumulating in her own mind. He listened, admitted he had noticed similar things, had simply not allowed himself to examine the noticing too closely. It was the following morning, while she was preparing breakfast, that she heard children's laughter from outside, distinct, close. She looked out the kitchen window in time to catch a glimpse of two children running along the path beside the house, there for a moment and then simply gone. No one had mentioned children among the village's remaining households. She said nothing to her husband about it that morning, simply added it quietly to what she was beginning to count. They began together, paying more careful attention, counted the households, compared what they could confirm, physical purchases at the weekly market, visible entries and exits from houses, direct daylight interactions that felt unambiguous against the dozen households they had been told remained. The numbers did not match. Roughly half the village's welcoming population, by their careful count, existed in some category the couple could not comfortably name. Present, warm, consistently keeping the old customs with more devotion than the clearly living residents managed, but not by any measure they could apply entirely among the living. You are still here. Good. Some stories need a witness all the way to the end. I wonder if half your welcoming new neighbors turned out to belong to Granny's world rather than yours. Would the vegetables taste any different? They did not leave. This is the detail I find most worth telling you. They discussed it at length across several evenings and arrived at a decision that surprised them both. The village was peaceful. The customs, once understood, cost them very little to maintain. The neighbors, living and otherwise, had been nothing but warm since their arrival. They decided together that whatever the village actually was, it was a good place to live. They continued following the rules with the same care the other residents showed, left the offerings fresh, kept the northern room closed after dark, did not sweep after sunset, and found over the following years that the village's welcome never wavered, that the vegetables continued arriving at their gate regardless of who exactly delivered them. That being a good neighbor in this particular village mattered considerably more than the technical question of which side of things you currently occupied. Da, I have always admired villages with that particular wisdom. I think about communities that outlast the ordinary boundaries of who belongs to them. Most villages, when their living population dwindles past a certain point, are simply abandoned. The customs lost, the shrines untended, the particular character of the place dissolving into the general category of rural decline. But occasionally a village retains enough of what it was, through those who never fully left, through customs maintained with a devotion the merely living rarely manage, that it continues functioning as a genuine community, welcoming newcomers, sharing vegetables, explaining the old rules with patient warmth, regardless of which of its residents on any given morning happened to be entirely among the living. Da, some villages simply refuse to become abandoned. I find this the most hopeful thing about them. Another whispered story from Japan, shared quietly here beside the kotatsu. If you find an inexpensive house in a village that a historian's careful report made briefly famous, and you are the one buyer fortunate enough to succeed, go. Accept the vegetables at your gate, learn the rules quickly and follow them carefully. Do not sweep after sunset. Keep the offerings fresh. Keep the northern room closed. And if, after some months, you begin noticing inconsistencies among your welcoming neighbors, the woman always in her garden, the man always at the same spot, the couple who wave but are never seen arriving or leaving, do not be alarmed. Simply count carefully. Compare what you can confirm against what you were told, and when the numbers do not match, decide, as this couple did, whether the village's warmth is worth the small adjustment to your understanding of who exactly your neighbors are. Most who make that decision find the village worth staying for. The vegetables, after all, taste exactly the same either way. If this story stayed with you, if the dark or the shadow feels a little closer tonight, you know where to find me. I am always here beside the kotatsu, watching, waiting. And if you wish others to find their way here too, there is something small you can do. Like and subscribe. I would not object. And if you have a story of your own, this quiet room has space for your experiences too. Granny is always listening.